Hi there, Mr. Withers here. We're going to work today with some subtraction of fractions. Now, we're going to start off with just some mixed number examples rather than starting with plain old fractions, because I feel like we're going to get the same idea with starting with mixed numbers as we would anyway, and it'll save us a little bit of time here in the end. So remember, if we are just subtracting plain fractions, we just use that common denominator method, but we don't have to mess with the whole number. With mixed numbers, that's where we tend to make our mistakes. So that's the examples we're going to do today. Now, I want you to pretend that we have 7 1/3 minus 2 5/7. Okay, now the first thing that I know about adding and subtracting fractions is that I always need to have a common denominator. So in this case, 7 and 3, my best common denominator is going to be 21. So I want to take this times 7 and this times 3 so that my denominators look the same. Remember, with a fraction, anything I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So my fractions now look like 7 and 7/21 minus 2 and 15/21. Now, when we get to this point, we have two strategies we can use. Okay, one would be to leave them as mixed numbers, and another would be to turn them to improper fractions. And I'm going to do this both ways because I think both are important for us to know how to do. Okay, the first way would be to just leave them as mixed numbers. And if I'm going to work with these as mixed numbers, the most important thing that I know is that I have to work with the fractions first. I have to look past the whole numbers and look at the fractions. So if I take 7/21 minus 15/21, do I have enough there to do that subtraction? Okay, the answer is no. I can't take 7 minus 15 without going negative. So I need to borrow from somewhere. In this case, I'm going to borrow from that whole number 7 and turn it into a 6. Now, when I borrow one whole, if I'm dealing with 21sts, I'm borrowing 21 out of those 21sts because it's one whole. 21 over 21 is 1. So if I'm going to borrow 21, I can add that to the top. So the top of this fraction now becomes 28 over 21. Now I am absolutely able to take 28 minus 15. That leaves me with 13 over 21, and 6 minus 2 is 4. That's nothing that I can simplify. Okay, I'm going to write that down here in the corner so that we can remember that that's what we got using this method, and then we're going to try turning them to improper fractions, see if we get the same thing. Okay, so let's erase that work, and we're going to go back to where we started. 7 and 20, oops, sorry about that. 7/21. Okay, now in this case, rather than taking and finding our fractions first and then our whole numbers, we're going to turn these into mixed numbers. So to do that, I use the check mark method. And the check mark method means that I'm going to take 7 times 21, which is 147, plus 7 more, and you could use a calculator for this, that's fine. That gives me 154 over 21. Minus, same idea over here, okay, 2 times 21 is 42, plus 15 is 57 over 21. Okay, now I have common denominators, I have improper fractions. All I need to do is subtract my numerators. So I take 154 minus 57, and I get 97 over 21. If I simplify 97 over 21, I know that 21 goes into 97 4 times with 13 left over. And that number should look familiar. So subtracting fractions in this way, we do have two methods. Okay, whichever one works for your brain, I'm fine with you using, but just make sure that we keep our math straight and we stay organized on our page. So if we're using the check mark, we continue to rewrite those fractions until we have them in a state we can work with. If we're choosing to use leaving them as mixed numbers, that's fine, but make sure that we're borrowing if we need to, because the temptation is to just go ahead and subtract even though it's going to be a negative number, and we can't do that. So we need to make sure we borrow if that needs to happen. Okay? If you have questions, please make sure you chat with me. If you are a pre-algebra student, stay watching. We're going to do one more example with some negative numbers. If you're an EDM student, you can go ahead and shut the video off now and do some practice problems. Thanks for watching. All right, pre-algebra. Let's take a look at an example with some negative numbers included. Subtracting fractions with negatives, or mixed numbers with negatives, tends to be one of the most tricky things that we do in this fraction unit. So I want to make sure that we understand what we're doing. So we may end up with a problem that looks like -3 1/4 minus -2 1/12. Now, in this case, the trickiest thing that we have to remember is that when we have -3 1/4, we want to think of it in terms of a number line. Okay, if this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going -1, 2, 3, and then another -4. So our -3 1/4 is located down in that direction. The temptation when we do this as math students is that we think, oh, hey, I'm doing subtracting and negative, so that's just like adding. And we start to go in this direction and we add the 1/4 and the 1/12 together. But really, that 1/12 is starting to negate that negative that we have already had on our number line. And so we can't really just add the fractions and the whole number separately. We have to think about this in a completely different way. We have to think about how far negative we've gone with that first number, and we want to start working back in the positive direction with our second number. My best advice to give you on this would be to turn your mixed numbers into improper fractions every time, because it means that we're not going to mix up those fractions and whole numbers with positives and negatives. It means that we'll always understand exactly what's happening with our positive and negative numbers. So I would always encourage you, just turn them improper when we subtract fractions, especially when there's negatives involved. Okay, so here's our original problem. 3 1/4. I'm going to use that patented check mark method to get 13/4. That's a negative number. I'm going to use it here to get -25/12, and I am subtracting. Now I can look at this and say, hey, I know my math tricks. Minus a negative is the same as adding. So I have -13/4 plus 25/12. First thing I know when I add and subtract, I need to have common denominators. So I'm going to take this 4 and turn it into a 12 by going times 3 times 3. So that gives me 39/12. So now I have -39 plus 25. So we think on that number line, or like vertical number line, we could think, I'm 39 feet below sea level. I'm rising 25 feet. Okay, I'm -$39 in debt. Someone gives me $25. So my net change now, what I would end up with is a -14. -14 over that common denominator of 12. When I simplify that, I end up with -1 2/12, which can simplify to -1 1/6. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so the best advice I can give you when we're subtracting fractions, especially mixed numbers with negatives, always turn to an improper fraction. Make sure you keep your signs straight, know your rules, know your tricks, and ask me if you have questions. There's that bell. Go ahead and work on some practice problems. Let me know if you have any questions as you're working through this, or if you want to review, feel free to rewatch this video anytime you want. Good luck.